Hey gang, so I'm going to just introduce you to a few basics of selection tools in Photoshop, and this will deal mainly with the most simple selection tools. We'll get into more complex options later, but I have some notes I made and I'm putting them up here so for me and you, so feel free to check these out. So I'm going to call these analog selection tools, and first I'm going to talk about the move tool and options, and then some basic simple selection tools you might use. Now, why do I have all these? This is just totally random. I just have photos and shapes on this image just to kind of demonstrate this to you. Now, what is it? What is a selection tool anyway? Well, in Photoshop, you have what's called an active layer. So if you look on the right here, the active layer is the one that's highlighted in blue. And that's the one that you can actually make a mark on or do something with. Okay? When within that active layer, if you make a selection, it's almost like making an active area within that layer. So for example, right now there's no selection. I have a brush, and on this picture of E, I can paint everywhere. Notice it's not showing anywhere up here because these layers are all above picture of E. Okay, let me undo that. I'm going to say Command Z. If I make a selection and I do the same thing, so I'm going to switch to my brush, just use the shortcut B. Notice, even though I'm going all over the place, it only makes a mark within that selection. So we have an active layer and almost an active area within that. You can kind of keep specifying these things. Okay, let me undo that and deselect, either select, deselect, or I'll just do the shortcut. Okay, so your simplest selection tools are up top. Now the move tool is not really a selection tool, but it kind of goes hand in hand with them. It's one of the most important and basic tools in Photoshop. Okay, the move tool allows you to, guess what, move things, right? Of course, the object on the active layer, right? Now, a few things you should know. It has some presets up top. If I have this auto select area selected, notice I can just click on different areas. And did you see how it changed the active layer? Just click, change the active layer. That's useful at times, and at times it might not be. Right? Luckily, this is a pretty simple image, so it would be pretty useful. If I were to go into, say, something like this, and that one looks pretty good. Let's say I'm trying to select the background. I don't know what that selected. I tried to select the background, it didn't get it. Right? So when you get real complex, sometimes that option isn't very useful. And in that case, just take that off, and you just have to actually click on the layer before you do things with it. Now, one other quick shortcut you can do with the Move tool is if you hold the Alt or Option key, notice the cursor changes to a double arrow, and you can click and drag, and it duplicates that layer. That will be useful to you later. Okay, let's get into selection tools. Now, remember, anytime there's this little arrow on these tools, it means there's more tools that live with it. So I just hold down my mouse and all of these pop up. We're going to talk about mostly the rectangular marquee tool, the elliptical marquee tool, and the freeform lasso. Those are your most basic, I call analog selection tools. Photoshop doesn't know what you're selecting. You have to do all the work. Okay, it's not trying to help you. Single row and single column marquee tools I don't really use, but I guess they could be used for cleaning up the edge of something. If you need just a single row or single column of pixels selected, that's why you would use those. Okay, but just quickly to demonstrate, all your selection tools, when chosen, have some options that are similar up top. They have a new selection, and you'll see if I hover above this, it says new selection. They have add to a selection, subtract from a selection, and intersect with the selection. So if I click and drag, new, right? If I click and drag again, it's all new. This one, add to, if I click and drag now, you'll notice it's added to that selection. If I say subtract from, it subtracts from it. And if I say intersect, it'll just choose the area that's inside both of those selections. Okay? There are shortcuts for add to and subtract from. So if you hold Shift, notice there's a little plus by my cursor. I can click and drag. If I hold Option or Alt, I can click and drag and it will subtract anything that I have lassoed with that marquee. Okay. These also have an option called feathering. Okay. That will only make sense when I make a mark with this. So let me show you what that is. Okay, I'll just add, I'll say 50 pixels. I think the max you can do is 250. And I'll just say new selection. Let's do this, and I'll use a brush. Let's say B. And let's put it on a new layer down here. Okay. And notice, do you see what's happening at the edge? How it's blending out to transparent? That's what's called feathering. And the higher the feathering number, the further the blend, the longer it will take to blend to transparency. Okay, I just said Edit Undo or Command Z and Command D to deselect. The other thing you can do with a lot of these selection tools is you can change the style to fixed ratio, so like 2 to 1. So you'll notice, see my rectangle always stays 2 units wide and 1 unit high, basically. Or fixed size, so you can change it to a specific size, in which case it actually doesn't change when I click and drag, it just moves the whole selection. Okay, I still have my feathering on. You can combine selection tools too, so I could start with a rectangular marquee, and say I make this, and then I hold it down into elliptical and I want to add to it, and I'm going to click and drag, and there, right, so it's, oh, sorry, subtract from, right, let's add to it. Right, so ellipses are ovals or circles. Same options in terms of style and feathering here. There are a few shortcuts you can do with these, so if I say new selection, let's deselect, and I hold Shift, you'll notice that this is constrained to a circle. Okay, and same thing with the rectangle. If I do a new selection, deselect, oh, change back to normal style, and I hold Shift, you'll see it's a square. It can't be a rectangle. So that constrains it. Okay, and that's the same with your shapes when you get to them later, actually creating shapes. Another thing you can do is if you hold Option and the, well here, I'll just hold the Option or Alt key, and you'll notice now this is growing from the center. If I don't do that, it grows from the corner. Okay, Option or Alt grows from the center, regular grows from the corner. Okay, if I hold Shift and Option or Alt, grows from the center and it's a square. Okay. Last, just with this lasso tool, and oh, I guess then the polygonal lasso. These are both, again, analog tools where you have to tell it exactly what to select. Okay. So the lasso tool is just a freeform lasso. I'm clicking and holding my mouse or trackpad while I sort of draw this weird shape. Okay. So it went ahead and made this totally freeform shape. I'm going to deselect it, Command D. If I stop the shape, say here, you'll see it just connects it. And there's a shortcut with this too, but let me show you the polygonal lasso first. So with this one, it makes a polygon with all straight sides. So you just click to create corners. And this is really useful for cleaning up a selection that you need a straight edge on. But again, right, so see that little circle at the end? When you close it, you can go there. Or I could double click and it will close it. Or I could press Return or Enter and it will close it. Okay? So again, this is the area that I can make marks in right now. So it's kind of an active area within an active layer. Okay, so you may be wondering, why do I even care about this selection stuff? And I wanted to just show you a few super simple things you could do even with the mostly the selection tools we just learned, right? So these ones I made some shapes, this one with the polygonal lasso, and this one was feathered with the ellipse. And I used a smart selection tool, which I'll show you next, to just subtract this area where I am and where my husband is. And I made a new layer with some shapes and added a blend mode. So it just kind of made this effect over this text, right? So you can just pick out areas in the photo to do something with. I also created something from scratch, and I'll do another little demo to show you how simple making something like this is. So one thing I forgot to talk about was that you can also move selections. So, you know, I did this when I was making the teeth here or the eyes here, perhaps. So I can create a selection, and then you'll notice when I still have a selection tool being used, and I hover over that selection, I can click and drag it to move it around. I can also just press my arrow keys to nudge it. Okay, and if I were filling it, like let's pretend this is going to be part of a building here, and we'll choose a brown, and we'll control click and fill it with our foreground color. So let's say I wanted another building the same color. I did this for the teeth and the eyes and the eyebrows. Right? Remember our move tool, we can just go over that, and normally it would cut it out of the layer like that if I click and move it, because it's on the same, everything was built on the same layer. So it's got that scissors. But if I hold Option, remember it duplicates it, and it's going to keep it actually on the same layer this time because it's a selection. So before it copied it to a new layer, this time it copied it on the same layer. Okay, see you in the next video.